Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Today we'll be talking about the Doctor of Philosophy, the PhD program in education here at the School of Education at Johns Hopkins. As I am looking at the participants, I do see some familiar names, so I'm sure some of you have already talked to me either in appointments or via email, but my name is Serena Stewart. I'm Associate Director of Admissions here. And I am joined by Dr. Gelbach. He's our faculty lead in the PhD program. So I'm going to get us started, and then we will, go over just an overview of, Johns Hopkins, the School of Education, the PhD program, the admissions process. So welcome again, and thank you for being here. So here at Hopkins, we are proud to be America's very first research university. In our entire community, we have more than 24,000 students in our undergraduate and graduate programs. We have currently 9 divisions, soon to be 10 divisions open. And our community is very intellectually diverse as well as globally diverse. We are proud that we have put more money into research than any other U.S. academic institution for the past 32 or 36 years and counting. Our community stretches to every corner of the globe. We conduct research, training, and related activities in more than 150 countries. So as I mentioned, we have 10 academic divisions in our large university. The School of Education represents one of those divisions. We have graduate programs here in the School of Education and master's and doctoral programs. You can see all of the academic divisions listed here. I won't read them all off for you, but the School of Government and Policy will open to its very first cohort in fall of 2026. Our PhD program is interdisciplinary, and because you are such a big part of the Hopkins community, you can take advantage of some of the other resources at one of our other 10 academic divisions. So bringing it down a little bit further as we look at the School of Education and where we are settled as a part of that larger university, our total enrollment is about 1,100 students. We offer 10 master's degrees, 2 doctoral programs, and 2 graduate certificates. Our community is made up of over 109 faculty members as well, and 25,000 plus alumni. That alumni network is growing with over 500 degrees that we award annually. We are typically ranked in the top 20 or the top 10 by the U.S. News and World Report. This year, our ranking is 14. Many years we have reached the top 10 as top education schools in the globe. So as I introduced myself earlier, I am Associate Director of Admissions here in the School of Education. I am now going to pass it off to Dr. Gelbach. He'll introduce himself, talk a little bit more about the PhD program before I take it over at the end and talk more about admissions.
Fantastic. Serena, thanks so much. And thank you guys all for taking the time, for coming, for your interest in the Hopkins School of Ed PhD program. So me, in a very quick nutshell, I sort of split my research interests between kind of social aspects of schooling, motivation, particularly the sort of relationships that students and teachers have at school, how we sort of read and understand each other and maybe even misunderstand each other on occasion. So that's sort of half of my research interest, and the other half is what you see on the screen, this idea of planetary health, environmental education. So the big idea there being, if the planet's not healthy, we're not going to be healthy. And so getting people to sort of wrap their minds around that, wrap their heads around sort of how we need to behave differently with respect to our treatment of the planet, that's kind of a huge global education problem. And so with a really fantastic group, I do spend part of my time at this interdisciplinary center, the Hopkins Institute for Planetary Health. So that's me very briefly. But let's, this is not about me. This is about you. So let's maybe start with a question that I think will be one of the big ones that some people have, and some people will be pretty clear on this, I suspect. Um, but we do get questions because there is an EDD and a PhD, and what's the difference between these two doctorates within the field of education, and then specifically at Hopkins. And you can see sort of some of the fast facts about credits and timing and those sorts of things. And the things that leap out at you may be things like, oh, fully funded versus, partially funded. Um, and those are important. And, I can work full time in the EDD program. And, you can't do that in the PhD program, and you have to move here for the PhD program. It is in person, and you don't for the EDD, it's remote. And those sort of life factors and considerations are huge, and I'm not undermining those. But from our perspective, this is really about the kind of research you're doing. And so the EDD is very much applied research. So you want to bring the toolkit of research to a particular place and a particular problem and kind of solve that problem. And that is a great and really valuable kind of research, but it is not the kind of research that we're emphasizing in the PhD program, which is creating knowledge that is generalizable. And so, the idea here is that you're leveraging a disciplinary field. For most of our students, it's sort of some combination of like sociology of education, psychology of education, trying to influence policy and or practice. But the idea being to develop generalizable knowledge. And then as you can see on the last row of the grid that is in front of you, the career pathways tend to be a little bit different. So EDD, folks are not stopping out of their careers oftentimes. And so they often keep going with their same position, or they're using it as a way to pivot to a different kind of position. But then what we see in the PhD program, and I think we've got a slide to get into more detail later on, obviously going into the academy, professorships, becoming academic researchers like at a think tank or a center, like I mentioned, the Johns Hopkins Institute for Planetary Health. So that kind of a role. Educational consultants is another one that some of our students have done. So that's sort of the broad brushstrokes, and we'll take some questions at the end. So if some of this is still unclear after a few more slides, we can move back to it. But I think maybe now we'll transition more to focus on the PhD program. Thanks, Raina. And so, there's, I think, a sense in which the goals or the objectives we're hoping is to prepare you for these sort of faculty roles, educational research roles. And the idea is really to be able to use this skill set, this toolkit that we hope to imbue you with, to, improve educational policy and practice. And we do, maybe particularly because we're located in Baltimore, but we do have this orientation to be maybe a little bit more disproportionately interested in serving and helping out and doing research for the benefit of underserved schools and students. And we really do want folks leaving our program with a familiarity and a fluency in a couple different disciplines. And so being able to draw from some of the different methodological, like research methods, kinds of approaches in, say, psychology and sociology, or more policy-oriented approaches. So with that as a sort of like, on paper kind of thing, I think maybe that's sort of the instrumental goal of the program. But I think in terms of the kind of the ethos and the core substance of the program, a lot of what we're really trying to do is to get you guys thinking theoretically and then improving practice as a result. So I think there are some PhD programs, possibly ones you're looking at, which are really oriented toward like solving real world on the ground problems, and others where it might be like really developing theory and big ideas, and whether they pertain to the real world or not is, whatever, take it or leave it. We're greedy. We want both, right? We want contributions to theory that have practical implications. If anyone's familiar with Stokes's quadrant, he talks about Louis Pasteur's research as both theoretically making a big contribution, but also practically important, uh, referring to pasteurization as a process. So if that's sort of our end goal, both kind of like practically and philosophically, then I think I've mentioned this, we really draw, I think, pretty heavily from kind of learning sciences, educational psychology on the one hand, sociology of education on the other hand, as levers and disciplinary lenses through which to influence educational policy and practice. And so you'll get that in the coursework, like that theme will come out. But then it is also very much like the way you're learning how to do research is very much this sort of apprenticeship model. And so as you're thinking about applications and applying, you really want to nail down like who is the faculty member that has strong alignment of interests with me and my interests. And if that person doesn't exist here at Hopkins, like, it's worth thinking twice about whether we're the right place to apply for you. But off our website, you can see links to all the faculty profiles and who tend to be the faculty that are more engaged with the PhD program. But that's not to say you couldn't reach out to other faculty as well. But your primary advisor, typically you're sort of admitted with a particular primary advisor, sometimes two. We're doing more and more of that of late. But you're going to work closely with this person or these couple people. And so a lot of how you learn to do research is this kind of apprenticeship under a particular faculty member. All right, so let's maybe pivot and talk a little bit about just kind of some of the structural things about the program. So typically students are getting through the program in 4 to 5 years. I don't think I know of anyone who's gotten done in less than 4. I've been here about 7 years at Hopkins. Where the students are unionized now. So there's 4 years per kind of the union contract, 4 years of tuition coverage, a stipend that goes along with that. And you get both individual, and I think if you have families, you've got family options for healthcare, vision, dental insurance. Typically, we're asking students to do at least 2 teaching assistantships. Sometimes it's for the employment that you have to do as union representatives, or sorry, as union members. But oftentimes those are research assistantships. And so we'd want to like figure out some way to get you some teaching experience, because even for people that are going into like a research think tank, you're still doing a lot of teaching, right? You're explaining your findings to people. You're trying to convince, especially if you're at like a AIR kind of shop or a West Ed, any of those places that do, or at least used to do, lots of federally funded grants. You got to convince people about the importance and the merit of what you're doing, and you got to get the next grant. And so a lot of that same skills that you would have learning how to be a better teacher are going to apply there. So that's kind of why we have that requirement. On to some more nitty gritty stuff, 72 credits realistically, because of that second bullet point where, a master's degree is required. Pretty much every single student transfers in these 12 credits from their master's degree. So functionally, most people are looking at 60 credits of doctoral work that they need to do. And then, even more like just bald truth, a bunch of those credits are not courses. Like, you're not sitting in class. A bunch of them are, for almost all of the students, doctoral research. And so you just sign on to like get some credits by doing research with your advisor. And so the credit thing is really not a barrier for anyone. It's not that important, frankly. It's a little more ticking the box for most students. And so more interesting on the next slide is really kind of what are you taking for coursework, and then what are the kind of milestones, like what are you accomplishing while you're here in terms of research. And so we are, I think, compared to a lot of places, a more sort of like research methods focused, and we really pride ourselves on having producing students who are excellent methodologists. And so you see that as sort of the highest number of credit hours of required courses that you have to take. And then there are core seminars that tally up to about 15 hours. There's some that's a little bit in flux right now. So it could be, I don't think it's going to be more by the time you get here, but it could be fewer. So there's a sociocultural course, a science of learning course, a sociology of ed course, and a policy course that are kind of the core of that right now. There used to be two more sociologically oriented courses. And so that's the part that's in flux a little bit. And then a vague threat that we might sort of introduce economics of education, but that's TBD. So you can't quote me on that one. And then beyond that, right, we want people to, kind of chart their own path a little bit, figure out what they need. The entire rest of the university is open to you. So we've had students over in public health, over in arts and sciences, taking other kinds of courses on the sort of electives, and even sometimes directed readings and other divisions. And so really figuring out, given this entire huge university, like what's going to make the most sense for me. And so that flexibility, I think most students find to be really, really nice. And then I mentioned there are a lot of sort of dissertation research credits, which typically is with your advisor, but it doesn't have to be. And that sort of fills out the balance of the credit taking for most students. I mentioned 12 credits transfer in, and that's usually taken on that. I think it was like the third bullet point of electives. And so actually one last thing on that, but then, if you're coming in with like a really strong background in statistics, like even though the intro to statistics course or required course, like we'll happily waive that for you if it's not going to be productive. And so I think one of the benefits of a smaller PhD program is we really do, I think, do a pretty good job of figuring out like what does each individual student need, and how can we tailor the sort of like generic requirements of the program to really fit for you and your needs and your sort of educational trajectory through the School of Ed here. All right, so this I think gets more exciting. So especially this first one, I've kind of fought hard for this personally. We used to have comprehensive exams that you had to do before the beginning of year 3. I think this is going to be a lot better and make more productive students. So we've replaced that requirement with an independent research project. So by, really the end of year 2, but like absolutely no later than the start of year 3, you submit a potentially publishable paper. So the idea would be that you get something submitted to the big education research conference, because that deadline is typically in July, but then you're getting a paper submitted for publication by, before you hit year 3. And so hopefully that is cycling through the publication process as you are thinking about like, okay, what do I want my dissertation to be about? Is it a big book? Is it 3 separate studies, kind of a 3-paper dissertation model? And so sometime during year 3, we're somewhere between hoping and expecting that you get that dissertation proposal completed and done. And then, most students, I think, were kind of imagining and hoping for year 4, but some people do figure out ways to do year 5. You have a final doctoral dissertation submitted, and corresponding oral defense for it. So those are kind of the big milestones: independent research project, dissertation proposal, dissertation defense. And just to give a little flavor of what kinds of things people have done in fairly recent history, here's a handful of kind of different dissertation studies that have occurred recently. I'm also noting, and I'm a terrible multitasker, but I'm noting a question in the text, and I think I'll just kind of keep going for now, but I will definitely get back to that. It's a great question. And if you want to keep populating them, that's totally fine. I'm going to ignore them for now because some of them might get answered along the way. But yeah, feel free to sort of use that as you see fit. We'll keep going for now, and I think we're making fairly good time. So there should be lots of time for questions towards the end. All right, so yeah, a little flavor. I'm not going to read these to you, but I think what you do see here, at least in a number of these, is this notion that, yeah, we do want to make these contributions to theory, but not just for theory's sake, right? We want to have an impact on policy, an impact on practice. And so I think that that theme comes through in pretty much all of these different recent dissertation studies. All right, so then just a little bit more, and I don't know, maybe this is my personal humble brag about the program, but on the next slide, we're going to see some of what our students have accomplished. Actually, next couple slides probably. And so one of the most prestigious things you can do as a doctoral student within PhD programs in education is this jointly sponsored Spencer Foundation National Academy of Education Dissertation Fellowship. And so we've had, I think it was just 2 years ago, we had the one winner of that award. AERA, the American Educational Research Association, has a similar dissertation fellowship, and we've had a winner there. We've had a Black Honor Society. Actually, I think it's more underrepresented minorities, generally speaking. So we've had someone inducted into the Johns Hopkins chapter of that. So our students have been really, really successful over the past handful of years. And we even have a pretty nice internal award where 1 year every single student gets a $1,000 award, and they get to invite a speaker out to campus. And so, that's another great line on the CV for a lot of students, more internal and sort of less nationally prominent, but still a really good thing that, much smaller competition pool. And again, every single year, one of our students is getting that award. So that's one way to toot our own horn, I guess, a little bit in terms of what our students have done. But also, I think we're landing students in really good positions. And so, again, it's, I think, sort of an increasing trend toward positions in academia, whether it's faculty positions or postdoc kind of positions. Obviously, government is, a little bit harder to do in education these days. So I kind of expect that trend will continue, but from left to right, you're seeing our grads who are respectively a professor at Vanderbilt in the anthropology department. I think actually Sue has finished her postdoc at UVA, and I think has a faculty position as a professor in Korea now, but I should reach out to her and double check that. And then Amanda, did such a great job with her career here that we couldn't let her go. And she's been at Hopkins ever since. So she's directing one of the, or maybe assistant directing one of our centers right within the School of Education. And she teaches in the PhD program now too. All right, last thing, and again, in the spirit of sort of impacting policy and practice, like our students are really good about not just getting out journal articles that other academics read, but in the case, this is Amanda Neitzel again, um, her, I think this was her dissertation study, got picked up by the news. And lo and behold, like, my goodness, it makes a really big difference if students can see the front of the classroom. And so they had this whole randomized controlled study where they gave out eyeglasses to students in Baltimore City public schools, and it was hugely helpful. And interestingly, like way harder to keep that up due to lots of complications I won't bore you with right now, but great example of how our research is getting out into the public conversation more. And so that's just one example. I think another thing that's sort of fun, I mentioned some of the academic positions. We actually sent 3 of our graduates last year up to Brown University. Sarah Caroleo is one of them. She's got a postdoc at the Annenberg Institute. And this was actually just a class assignment, right? So it was to write an op-ed about some of the stuff that we were covering in the science of learning class. I think this was actually the year that I taught it. But she, had a structure from that class, a draft of the paper, eventually sent it off and got it published in Education Week. So that was kind of fun. And again, just an indication of how we really are trying to sort of shape the public conversation around education and have influence that way. I think we've even got a couple more examples. So this one is more of a, standard journal article kind of thing. But the highlight here is that the student, Natalie, now a graduate, is first author and the faculty member is second author. And that's a really common way for this to unfold. So, we really urge people to have conversations about authorship early. And so, oftentimes students are the ones ending up as first author. Jody Miller, a graduate who's still here as a postdoc, and just such neat stuff that she's working on, has developed her own app called WellCheck, where she's helping teachers just check in with students and see how they're feeling today. And these are typically younger students who might really struggle with more of a standard survey item. And so we see the range of emojis. Overall, how are you doing? And teachers have found this super, super useful in terms of just checking in and getting a little pulse check at the very beginning of class or the beginning of the day. And they can get us a sense of how students are doing, or if someone's like really off, and that allows them to have a more personalized check-in. So this was, if you remember the dissertation topics, this is the same woman who was doing the stress research, whose dissertation title was listed there. So that got picked up on a bunch of different news things, but she was like on TV on the local CBS station. And then these are both doctoral students writing up a policy report for the Urban Institute. So again, just more ways that we're sort of trying to influence policy and practice. Okay, let me do one more thing, and then I want to hand it back over to Serena for a little bit for more of our nuts and bolts. So I feel like so much of applying to doctoral programs is about the fit. And obviously, we're a great fit for a lot of folks, and we've had some really successful students, but it's not the right place for everyone. And so I like to kind of end my little section here with trying to just give you at least my 2 cents of what makes this program a good fit for people. And then I guess maybe by implication, what makes it not a good fit if these don't sound appealing to you. So thing number one, you're looking for this apprenticeship experience. So I went through a program that was a little bit more of a cohort experience and classes and those sorts of things. And there were a lot of upsides to that. I loved my doctoral program. But that's less of what you're getting here, and you're getting more of a hands-on doing research alongside a particular faculty member or a team that the faculty member has put together. And one of the ways that we're trying to, develop that core idea further is to put together credit-bearing courses that are actually this like more of a team apprenticeship experience. So these research groups, we've had a couple of faculty members kind of pilot trying those out. They've been pretty successful so far. Students seem to really like them. And again, it's like helping us get research products out there and getting studies conducted and policy reports written up and publications sent out for journals. So apprenticeship experience is key and important. And there is still a cohort experience that you have that goes hand in hand. But we probably anchor, because it's a small program, typically admit about 5 students a year. And so at any given moment, 20, 25 students are around. So that apprenticeship experience is probably more the spirit of the program and the vibe that you'll get here. We've talked about the interdisciplinary approach. I think that's key. So if you want to be a historian of education, that's all you want to do, this is probably not the best program for you. We really do want folks who are excited to sort of pull from different fields and do a little bit more of shaping of their own academic identity. Third, like we talked about, the rigorous methodological training. I think maybe sub-bullet point of that is number 4. You want to learn research approaches of the future. So we've got a huge campus-wide AI initiative, and I think AI will increasingly get used to facilitate certain elements of research. But then there's also this, another strength of the program is really this idea of open science, where we're trying to be more transparent about what happens under the hood when we're conducting research. And so particularly thinking about, so often like, yes, it's really good to thoroughly analyze your data, but every time you run another statistical test, there's a chance you're getting a cool result just by chance alone. And it's not something that would like actually happen in the real world. You wouldn't get that result again in another study. And so there are techniques through this sort of open science approach where you can pre-register and state at the top, what are the hypotheses you're really testing out that are more confirmatory? And then everything else that you do, like all those extra analyses to thoroughly analyze your research, great, but they're exploratory. We shouldn't have as much faith in those results. We shouldn't make policy around exploratory results. And so that's a kind of research approach, this open science idea, that you're not going to get at a number of other programs, either at all or much. And I think, it's kind of a harder way to do research, but I think your studies are going to hold up under public scrutiny much better. They're going to be more meaningful for teachers, and it's, I think, just increasingly becoming accepted as a much stronger way to do research. So I think ultimately it's like a little more pain now, but makes our students much more competitive on the job market and frankly, just better researchers. And then this idea of sort of bridging research. So, being able to sort of pull from theory and be able to articulate a vision of why you think this thing that you're advocating for would be great for practice and great for policy. And you actually have some data and studies to back it up. And so, again, it is that sort of both and on the theory and practice that I think we emphasize. I'd like to think we do it quite well. And I think it has, just kind of an extra layer of value for the education community, like the practitioner community and the policy community. So I think those are kind of my, like, this is a really good fit for you, this program, if these all seem fairly appealing. And by contrast, if you're less interested in research methodology, or you really want to go deep in a particular discipline, definitely still have a look at us. Maybe there's a pathway for you here, but it might be that another program is actually even a better fit. So let me stop there. Serena, back over to you, and I'll start just kind of looking over some of the questions and get ready to answer those.
Awesome. Thank you, Hunter. So switching gears here and talking about the application requirements. So there are many components to the PhD application. You'll want to make sure you take note of them. The application deadline is coming up. We'll go over the timeline a little bit later, but it is important that you note that all of these components of your application are due by that application deadline. So first and foremost, there's the online application form. You can find that on our website. Before you submit that application, right after you submit that application, there's an $80 application fee. You'll need to upload either a resume or a CV along with that personal statement. You can find the prompt to the personal statement on our website, but that's really going to explore your research interest, your research question. If you find somebody who you are interested in working with and you want to name them in your essay, you can do that as well. In addition to that short essay, there's a writing sample, typically 20 pages or so, that you'll be required to upload 3 letters of recommendation. Definitely strong academic letters of recommendation, if it is appropriate for a professional letter of recommendation or someone who you have research experience with. The breakdown of, the letters of recommendation that we prefer, again, you can find more details about this all on our website. Official GRE scores are required. No, we cannot waive them. They are a required part of the PhD application. We get a lot of applications and are looking at a very small cohort of students every year. So that is just one other piece of the holistic application review that helps the faculty committee to make the tough decision that they have to make in looking over all of our qualified applicants. All your official transcripts are needed. This includes your undergraduate degrees and your master's degree. If you have any postmaster's work or even doctoral work, you'll need to submit all of those transcripts. And then after all of those items are completed before the application deadline, an interview may be required. You'll be contacted by the program if an interview is required. So looking at the international student requirements, in addition to all of those student requirements for the application we went over, our international students, if they have not taken any completed any degrees in the United States, do need to submit an English language proficiency test. You can see the minimum scores that we accept listed. If you have at least 2 years, a completed master's degree in the United States or another English-speaking country, you would qualify for the English language testing waiver. That information is within the application. You can upload a transcript to prove that. In addition, you'll have to just write a small paragraph on how you meet that English language waiver requirement. In lieu of those official transcripts that we talked about, if you received your academic credentials outside of either English-speaking Canada or the United States, you'll need to submit a course-by-course evaluation of your transcripts. There's a full list of credential evaluation agencies on the international website, which is listed below, but some of our most commonly used organizations are WES or World Education Services, IEE, the evaluation company. There's no preference as long as they are NACES approved, then you can use that credential evaluation agency. So moving on to the admissions timeline, the application is open now, so you can go ahead and start your PhD application today. That deadline that we talked about, where all your materials need to be received, is December 16th. And then once you receive an offer of admission, we align with the Council for Graduate Schools for your deadline to accept your offer of admission and being April 15th of 2026. So you'll have, a couple of months or so to make your decision. And then finally, tuition and fees. We went over this a little bit, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but all PhD students are eligible for full funding for up to 4 years. It includes a yearly stipend. It covers tuition fees and health insurance. In addition to some of those other requirements, as far as TA and working requirements that Dr. Gelbach covered, you must be registered full-time in good academic standing every semester in order to be to continue to be eligible for that funding. So at this time, we're going to open it up for the Q&A. I do see we have quite a bit of questions. So anything that is more program focused, I'll let Dr. Gelbach handle, but if there's anything admissions or funding related, I'm happy to take those.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks so much for getting us going with a bunch of questions already. So and especially appreciate these ones that are fairly straightforward and I can answer. Does the master's degree have to be in education? No. So someone like me, right? I'm an educational psychologist. If you have a master's degree in psychology, like that's going to be fairly interesting to me. And so totally open to that. If you have that and maybe some teaching experience, gosh, that seems like a really great fit. So I think the way I would think about the master's degree is the more relevant it is, the better off you are. Brooklyn, 2 questions. How strict is the master's degree requirement? It is strict. Is it non-negotiable? Yep, pretty much. And will you all be accepting applications for fall 2027? Yes. So we will do an admissions cycle next fall, like a year from now, that would, if accepted, you would then matriculate fall 2027. So that is the plan. Is it just a PhD in education without specializations? Or are there like strands of the program? Excellent question, Solomon. Thank you. So right now we spend a lot of time in these sort of professional development sessions that I lead sort of like every other week, basically, talking about, among other things, academic identity and how you want to shape that. And so it is not a program with specific and sort of like you're not going to get a specialization printed on your transcript, but we're going to work with you in a really individualized kind of way to make that academic identity work for you, resonate with prospective employers. And so it is a much more individualized approach than that. And so the way that you specialize and figure out your niche in the world of education and academia is much more personalized than that, actually. All right, Amanda, program and curriculum align well. Oh, with informal education, particularly. Oh, so I'm going to say no and yes, I guess. So informal education, yeah, maybe no is too strong. So we do have some faculty members who are doing informal education kind of stuff. We've got one faculty member who's doing some homeschooling kinds of things. We have me and another faculty member who are doing a fair bit of sort of environmental climate education kind of research within schools, but then also for the general public. My colleague who I'm thinking of is a bit more international in her orientation. And then obviously I would love to get more faculty members doing this kind of stuff. And then there are, tons and tons of other scholars at Hopkins working in that space. So I would say a little bit on the informal education piece of it and plenty on the environmental, climate change, planetary health piece of it. Donna, sadly, no, you're stuck with me today in terms of faculty members, but you do have access to the website. And so 100% encourage you to kind of browse through, reach out to faculty members, if you see, maybe one or two people who seem like they might be good prospective advisors. And so that's probably your best way, is to navigate toward individual faculty members that might be a good fit for you. Required GRE scores, like, you are required to submit them. There is no requirement of what numbers you get on those as those scores. That said, it's kind of a sliding scale, right? If you have off the charts amazing GRE scores, then that might help compensate a tiny bit for, I don't know, like a lower grade point average kind of thing. But the admissions process, very much holistic. We're looking at the whole package. We're looking a lot at fit. And so again, that person who's like, I want to do history of education, we just don't have a lot of people doing that kind of work. And so unless you've connected with one or two faculty members in the school, maybe over in the history department, and can really pitch in your statement of purpose a way that you have a vision for how this will really work, that's going to be a tougher sell for us than someone who's like, I want to do early warning indicators and help at-risk students like make it all the way to high school graduation, right? That little profile description has Bob Balfanz's name written all over it. And, he's great. So we could do that. Yeah, can you say more about what you look for in the personal statement of purpose? So I think probably the most helpful and instructive thing that I can say is such a good question. Like, to me, the real, like, so all the not at all competitive applications get screened out very early on. We don't even see those. But then between the good ones and the great ones, I think what the big difference to me is, the good ones are often like, I have this burning interest in, and they list out their research topic, and so Professor X, is also interested in that research topic, and it sort of stays at the topic level. And that's great and it's helpful, but like, lots of people are interested in lots of things. And so that doesn't differentiate your statement from others. But if you're like, I have a genre of a research question, I want to know the answer to this kind of a thing, and it's important for policy and practice in this way. And I think, a little bit of, between working with like Bob Balfanz and Jennifer Adams, I can really figure out the answer to this question in a useful way that'll do wonders for policy and for practice. That capacity to sort of like articulate, not necessarily like the research question you're going to look at, but like the genre of the research question, the kind of research question that you want to look at. Between that and then some experience maybe that you're identifying on your CV that shows how to do research, like, those are going to be kind of the big things. So, and that also is really much more helpful in getting a sense of, is there a fit, right? When you can articulate the question as opposed to just the topic. Total cost of the whole program. I would love to know the spirit of the question, because it's like, it's not costing you anything. It costs the school plenty. Ballpark like $100,000 a year per student, maybe, probably more than that by now. Anyway, so pop into the chat if you were looking for something beyond that, but it's not costing students anything, right? Full tuition paid for, full stipend, and the health insurance stuff, as we had on a different slide. Do you accept proposals with a focus on Africa? Again, I would say, like, look through our faculty listings. If you think there's a good fit with someone, then yeah, like, connect with them, make that argument. It really helps to have a faculty member who's excited about, like, gosh, I really want Serena admitted to this program because it's a perfect fit and she's going to do great research with me. So having that kind of like person going to bat for you is hugely helpful. And so, we don't have a ton of folks focused on Africa, but like, say more about your specific topic and interest to a faculty member. And if they're like, yep, that actually really works for me, and I've been wanting to explore this same phenomenon in Africa, then yeah, maybe there is a great fit there. Alan, thank you. Yeah, the independent research project at the end of the second year. We have just had that discussion, and I will say could be, doesn't have to be. And so I think that is sort of, again, to the like tailored and personalized essence of the program. For some students, it's going to make a ton of sense for this like amazing independent research project to maybe fold into, you know, one of the three studies of their three-study dissertation. And for other students, it's like, no, we'd love to see you get even more out of it. And for other students, it'll be like, I had a great idea in theory, it didn't work at all in practice. And that's kind of what the second year independent research project is for. And so I learned a ton from it. There's maybe not as much to publish as I had hoped. And so my dissertation is going to be totally new. Still, other people might be passionate about this topic and this research question, and then they execute it and they're like, wow, I'm not passionate about that after all, and I'm going to do something totally different for the dissertation. So lots of flexibility, and that gets negotiated out with one's advisor and committee members. Must I have faculty at Hopkins agree to supervise my research before I apply for admission? No, you can apply for admission without contacting any faculty members. I do think it probably puts you at a bit of a disadvantage. Most important maybe to be able to articulate who of the faculty would be a fit with you and why. And that at least lets us funnel your application to those faculty members so they can say like, yes, this is a great fit. There would be a ton of value added to my research group, or it's not really the direction my research is heading in after all. So, to your advantage to do that, but not a requirement. All right. Can I find an eligible PhD program at Hopkins? And it's also mandatory for me. So I'm not totally sure what the question is. Is the question like at all of Johns Hopkins University, is there a good PhD for me to pursue? I think maybe, probably. I like, if you're more interested in political science, I don't know those programs super well. So
Nor do I.
what's that?
I don't know many of the PhD programs across our other schools either. I can say that if you do a quick Google search, the website for our graduate programs will come up, and it links you to all the PhD programs in our catalog. So that's a really good way to filter out all of them if you're not necessarily finding that this one is a good fit. And then if all of your programs were conducted in English, it's not necessary for you to take the English proficiency exam. You'll just need to put that information in your application. Hopefully that answers the question.
All right. I think we're down to 5 minutes and I see lots of questions, so I'm going to try and go more quickly. More about the interdisciplinary focus. Yes, totally. Research could be like health and the arts as linked to education for sure. And yes, reaching out to individual faculty members with particular interests, and then again, a research question being sort of better to describe than just an interest, I think is great. So you do take a handful of different courses that expose you to the different disciplines, and then the idea is how do you leverage those in your research. So
that was the same question about a faculty reaching out.
Okay, great. Is this for current college students or once we graduate? Remember, you need a master's to apply. And so if you're in a like 4+1 program where you're getting your undergraduate degree and master's, then yeah, once you graduate, great. But you do need that master's. Serena, I'm gonna kick the English language proficiency requirement over to you.
Yeah, for sure. So if you studied in the United States in another place that speaks English, the UK, Australia, for more than 2 full-time years, then you would be eligible. If your language of instruction for more than 4 years was English, then you would be eligible for the waiver. All of it's pretty clearly indicated on our website. I'm also very happy to answer any specific questions you've got about it. I'll put the next slide over. It has my email address, so that way if anyone has any questions that we kind of leave unanswered, you'll be good to go.
Money to assist with moving. There is a sort of limited pool of funds that is need-based that happens or has happened every year that I've been here, and I assume that will continue. So yeah, there can be a little bit of help. Serena, why don't you take the G for
Yeah.
I'm less
So for different visas, typically it's F1 or J1 visas that our students are eligible for. Any other visa questions, I would recommend that you reach out to the Central University's Office of International Student Support. So I will put their answer, I'll type that website and contact information for you.
Great, thanks. Been out of school for 3 years. Would you recommend easing into school before applying to the program? You definitely need to be able to hit the ground running. So I don't know you, and and I don't know what your like appetite for workload is, and bandwidth, and those sorts of things, and family life. But what I can say is that you definitely want to be like ready to go on the starting line for when you first enter the program. Um, it's yeah, it goes quickly. I think people find the first couple of years where it's more coursework intensive to be, yeah, intensive. Um, Matriculating in 2027, can you elaborate on that? Merely saying that we're going to do the same admission. The plan is to do the same exact admission cycle next year and the year after that and the year after that. And so if you're not ready to apply this fall, no problem. We will still be around next fall doing the same thing. You could probably even come to a pretty similar webinar at about the same time next year. Hold an MBA in finance. Can I convert into an educational program? Do you have visa eligibility? So if you're asking like, can I apply to the program with an MBA in finance? Yes, we'd want to see why that's relevant and important for education. And so the more compellingly you can make that case, the better your odds are for admission. I guess I'm not totally sure about the visa question.
Um, Gosh, I
Yeah,
can't.
maybe you could elaborate on that question in the chat and just
Yeah, definitely.
clarify what you're asking. And then meanwhile, can the PhD be considered equivalent to PhD in health professions and education? I mean, certainly equivalent in the sense that they're both PhDs. I'm not totally sure what is being asked. If it is, can I sort of enter this PhD program and pursue a path of study that is basically like a PhD in the health professions? It'd be a little tricky, I think. It's not our sort of core structure of the program. I think, there is, I was actually just talking with one of our faculty members who does the MEHP, the Masters in Education and Health Professions. So I know there's a lot of interest in that, but it'd be a matter of connecting with certain faculty members, talking about the interest in the health education space that you want to pursue. And then I think making a compelling case for that structure and combination of advisors and sort of the path of how it would work for you. And so being able to do that, I think, yeah, could be pretty compelling for admissions. All right. Serena, I'm going to let you take Sarah's question, if that's okay.
Yeah. It- the Yes, the eligibility for the IELTS is only for 2 years. So if your scores are no longer eligible, you would have to retake it. And then for the GRE test scores, that has those scores are valid for 5 years. So if your GRE scores, if you took them for your master's degree over 5 years ago, you would have to retake them. If not, you can send the same scores.
All right, and I think we're about out of time. Can you sneak in
Yeah.
the last question there, Serena? I think that's probably for you too.
Which one is that?
Oh, if accepted into the PhD program, do you provide
Oh,
any?
need-based financial assistance for international students. So all students, whether international or not, are eligible for the funding that our PhD program offers. So again, you wouldn't have to apply for additional funding. It's funding for 4 years.
And I'll just do Paul's real quick and then say a huge thank you to everyone.
Yeah.
So interest in AI tools and educational policy. I think again the headline is figure out a set of faculty members for whom it would work, and they would be interested in it. And yeah, that could definitely happen if you have like a master's in engineering. Um, it's up to you to tell us the story about how this aligns with education, how it's going to impact policy and practice in compelling ways. But at face value, yeah, that could totally work. Um, Thank you guys
Awesome.
so much for taking the time. Great set of questions. I think we'll be doing another couple webinars later in the fall. So
Hmm.
feel free to stay connected on the ways that are up on the screen right now, or come back for another session. It'll probably be quite similar. The last one we'll do, the next one we'll do will be pretty similar. The final one we'll do will be a little bit more oriented toward kind of concrete strategies for how you want to do your application strategies. There'll be a few students on a panel for that one. So feel free to come back and get more kind of concrete how to apply kinds of tips. And otherwise, hope you have a great rest of your afternoons or evenings. Not sure what time zones you're in. But thank you for taking the time, and thanks so much for your interest.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Dr. Galbach. It was a great webinar. If you guys need anything, feel free to email me. We'll see you again hopefully soon.